Today, we're going to talk a lot about bipolar depression, and if you or someone you know has bipolar disorder, then you know firsthand how devastating the depression can be. It basically sucks the life out of us. When we get depressed, we lose our spark, and the things that normally keep us going, like our passions, motivation, self-esteem, and our sense of self-worth, just vanish. The depth and intensity of bipolar depression is really hard to even put into words, and I'll do my best to cover the basics in this video. Now, bipolar disorder can be complicated, to say the least, and like I've mentioned before, everyone experiences it a little differently. People have different triggers, symptoms, life circumstances, and especially different thresholds when it comes to coping with major symptoms like bipolar depression, so please keep an open mind when it comes to watching videos like this. So this makes video number 6 in our series, Faces of Bipolar Disorder. We've already covered diagnosis, type 1, type 2, cyclothymia, and rapid cycling. Now we're moving into the major symptoms like depression and the different types of mania. So check out that playlist to learn a lot about bipolar disorder with me. When it comes to bipolar depression, I'm sure many people will agree that it can disrupt or dominate our lives in ways that other symptoms might not. This comes down to how it affects our functionality. The way depression impacts our job, our ability to socialize or participate in society, our relationships, and our family life is different from how other symptoms like mania do. Now, that doesn't mean that mania is less serious. I'm talking about how it literally impacts our ability to function in the most basic ways, like getting out of bed or showering and handling basic responsibilities. Another reason why it's more debilitating is that depression tends to last longer than mania. An article in Bipolar Hope magazine quoted a study published in the Archives of General Psychiatry where people with bipolar 1 experienced depression 3 times more often than mania. For bipolar 2, the ratio was a shocking 40-to-1 in this study, so it's no doubt that bipolar depression can be of huge concern when it comes to treating the illness. Now, I'm bipolar type 1. I'd really like to hear in the comments from some people who have type 2 and let me know how you experience depression. Is it more often than the mania? Is it a lot stronger? I'd love to hear what some other people have to say, and it'd help others who are reading the comments to learn a little more about the types also. So join the conversation down below. I mentioned many times on my channel before how 20 to 30% of people complaining about bipolar depression to their doctors are misdiagnosed with general or unipolar depression. What I haven't mentioned is that the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, doesn't distinguish the difference between bipolar and unipolar depression. It's all basically the same. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't different levels of severity when it comes to experiencing depression, but the core symptoms that define the depression are constant. The bipolar diagnosis is actually based on how a patient experiences mania or hypomania with the depression. If you just go to a doctor and you say, "I'm depressed, I feel like crap, and I don't know why," without mentioning the mania, it's almost going to guarantee a misdiagnosis. Help your doctor to help you by learning more about the bipolar disorder before you talk to them. Check out my video on the top 10 signs of bipolar disorder. Go through it and write down the symptoms that you experience, how often they happen, and how strong they are on like a scale of 1 to 10. Some simple research can prevent you from going down a road that won't get you the care that you need. Sometimes prescribing a bipolar patient with just an antidepressant long-term instead of the combination of meds that are normally needed to treat bipolar disorder can actually make the symptoms of depression worse, and it just adds rocket fuel to the mania. That's why I'm always stressing how important it is to get an accurate diagnosis. So what are the main symptoms of bipolar depression, and what does it make us feel like? Well, some of the most primary or noticeable ones would be feeling sad, hopeless, or pessimistic, feelings of inappropriate guilt or worthlessness, or a sense of helplessness, having a hard time concentrating, losing interest in hobbies or not being able to enjoy things that you normally like doing. A big one is sleep disturbances like oversleeping or staying up all night, worrying with insomnia, changes in weight or diet like excessive eating or a noticeable loss in appetite, slowed behavior or speech, that's another big one. Extreme fatigue or a lack of energy is a good one, and then isolation from others, poor personal hygiene, and even actual physical symptoms like body aches, cramps, and digestive problems. and probably most dangerously, symptoms like self-harm and thinking about or attempting suicide. Now, considering bipolar disorder as a spectrum disorder, there's many different types and ways that people will experience the illness. Some have longer periods of depression than others. Some experience mixed states where they're manic and depressed at the same time. And then there's rapid cyclers like myself who constantly switch back and forth between the depression and mania. We'll get deeper into the specifics of all of these differences throughout the series, but when it comes to the actual depression, there's many universal signs or primary symptoms that usually go along with it, like the ones I just mentioned. It's also really important for people to discover what we call triggers that can add that rocket fuel I mentioned earlier to our symptoms. We're going to talk a lot about triggers on this channel as it grows, that's for sure. Triggers can be anything from people to places, substances, sleep changes, life events, and so much more. What triggers us can also change depending on what symptoms we're experiencing. There's different triggers for both mania and depression, and it's basically like figuring out what we're emotionally allergic to that just causes a much stronger emotional reaction in us than what others would experience. So as far as treatment goes for bipolar depression, it all starts with a proper diagnosis. So assuming you've been properly diagnosed with bipolar disorder and not just unipolar or general depression, medications can be a really good first line of defense to help people become more stable. Now, before I get further into talking about meds, I want to mention that I respect that there are many different effective treatments for bipolar disorder out there. Meds are just one of them, and it's up to you to find a well-rounded treatment program that works for you. It's not just one single thing that fixes bipolar disorder. It has to be hit from many different angles to manage the extreme swings from the depression to mania. That's why we call it a comprehensive treatment program. Each person needs to find the right combination of meds or supplements, lifestyle changes, self-help techniques, and care that works for them. With each video we've done in this series on the types of bipolar disorder, I've gone over possible treatments that vary depending on the type and frequency of symptoms. So if you've been diagnosed with a specific type, you'll want to watch the video that corresponds with that type. But to summarize, treating bipolar disorder modernly involves a combination of medication classes like mood stabilizers, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anxiety or sleep medications, and sometimes others. The goal of these combinations is to control both the mania and depression at the same time. It basically slows or minimizes the frequency of cycling from one extreme to another. It's really all about finding that sweet spot right in the middle where you get the most relief possible with minimal side effects. If we treat just the depression, the mania can get worse. If we treat just the mania, the depression can get out of control. The type and amount of meds can be different for everyone, and it takes time to find that sweet spot. For people like me who are sensitive to meds, it took me a long time to find a combination that literally changed my life, and the process was really hard on me. I don't want to discourage you because there's so many people that get lucky and see improvement right away when they start a treatment program, so I encourage you to be open-minded when it comes to treatment and don't give up just because of one bad experience with a doctor or a medication. The longer we go without some kind of treatment program, the worse the illness has been shown to get. Okay, so there's one last thing that I want to mention about the symptoms of bipolar depression or mania, and this is such an important one for friends and family. There's basically this tiny, delicate, fine line when it comes to finding balance in our lives. And here's a great analogy that I came up with. Let's say you're driving down the freeway really fast. Well, everyone has to stay in their lane, and there's these micro adjustments of the steering wheel that lets us do this. Well, people who don't have bipolar will most often stay in their lanes. They might drift a little bit, maybe rarely touching the lines on the left or right side of the road. And if they hit a small rock or a bump, they just keep on going. For those of us who have bipolar, it's like watching a drunk driver. I mean, we unintentionally swerve out of the lanes of balance, so to speak, and we're just all over the road. A small bump can literally send us flying or for a spin. We might even swerve so drastically that we lose control of the car, causing it to slide all over the place and crash. We might even hit others on the road, affecting their lives and causing damage along the way. So for our friends and family, you have to realize that the drunk driver you're watching driving squint and try and stay in their lane doesn't even realize how drunk they are. Part of the illness is not being able to see that we're starting to get symptomatic until the symptoms are so dominating that it's too late to get back in our lane. This is where our loved ones can be of huge help. You guys can often notice patterns of behavior that we can't. And if you know what to look for, the patterns start to become more and more obvious. There's probably certain things that we always say or do right before we start getting manic or depressed. If you notice us slipping out of our lane, you might be able to prevent an accident by gently mentioning what you're observing to us. It's kind of like saying, "Hey friend, I don't think it's a good idea for you to drive right now. Let me have the car keys." My partner always notices symptoms before I do. It's amazing. It amazes me still to this day that I couldn't see it. The key though is that I'm aware of the illness, I want to do something about it, and I've learned to respect and welcome the observation of others. Now, not everyone is that far along on their journey, but if they are, a little help from those around us can help keep us on the right road a lot more often. There is so much more that can be said about bipolar depression, but I think I've covered enough of the basics to help get some good info out there. If my channel's helped you out in any way, just imagine what these videos can do for the millions of undiagnosed people out there. If you want to help do something about bipolar disorder, please consider interacting with my channel by liking a video or subscribing. It increases the chances that YouTube will show that video to someone else who needs help. That's it. We're all in this together, and sometimes the smallest of gestures can make a really profound difference. Welcome to Polar Warriors. Make sure to check out the other videos in this series called Faces of Bipolar Disorder, and I'll see you back here again soon. Stay well, as best as you can.